here in the United States. Nkrumah spent 10 transformative years in the United States, beginning in 1935. Though he had almost no formal education, he was mentored by Horace Mann Bund, president of Lincoln University in Pennsylvania, one of our historically black colleges and universities. Nkrumah, like other blacks in America, struggled to keep body and soul together. He sold fish on the streets in Harlem, worked in a soap factory, and as a waiter on merchant ships. He absorbed African American history and even taught a course on the subject at the University of Pennsylvania. Nkrumah wrote, "I was interested in two sociological schools of thought in the United States, one represented by the Howard sociologists, led by Professor Fraser, and the other led by Dr. M.J. Herskovits, professor of anthropology at Northwestern University. The Howard School maintained that the Negro in America had completely lost his cultural contact with Africa, and the other school, represented by Herskovits, maintained that there were still African survivors in the United States, and that the Negro in America had in no way lost his cultural contact with the continent of Africa." Nkrumah supported and stated that he supported and still support the latter view. And he wrote that he even went to Howard University at one point to defend his position. Nkrumah came to know Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois, co-founder of the NAACP, editor of its magazine, The Crisis, and often called the father of Pan-Africanism. And I can tell you that we went to the Du Bois Center and we saw that great institution that exists, but I can also tell you that it is in need of help. It is not in the condition that it ought to be in. It needs help just with its physical being. It needs contributions. It needs money to keep the great works and the great legacy and the great heritage. Nkrumah also studied at the Blyton Society for the Study of African History in Harlem, and avidly read Marcus Garvey's Philosophy and Opinions. In 1945, he assisted Du Bois in organizing an international colonial conference at the Schomburg Library in Harlem, which proved to be a sort of dress rehearsal for what was to come next. He and his colleagues understood that Africa ought to be united. And in a sense, he began to talk about, in a serious way, Pan-Africanism. And later on, he organized the 5th Pan-African Conference in Manchester, England. Also assisted in organizing the Harlem Conference was Jomo Kenyatta, who would later become the first president of an independent Kenya. When the persecution of Dr. Du Bois during the Cold War reached unbearable levels, Nkrumah invited Du Bois to live in Ghana and assisted in setting up an institute to support Du Bois while he worked on the great encyclopedia Africana. Those of us who are now showing a little snow on the roof. People like myself, who was a young college student during this time, remember vividly what was taking place and how we felt and the ties that were being developed. We were hungry for information about our mother continent. We read everything that we could get our hands on, and we read it and we read it again. We couldn't get enough of it. We debated every aspect and every bit of news as freedom began to sweep across Africa, and we began to connect with it. Our own struggle for equality here was reaching a ferocity unseen since Reconstruction. And only a few months after independence came to Ghana, Governor Orval Faubus of my home state of Arkansas defied the Supreme Court and closed the public schools in Little Rock, reopening them as private segregated schools. Especially during the decade of the 1960s, the struggle for independence in Africa and the struggle for equality for African Americans played out side by side.